I was thinking today about how early do we write someone off? I, because I notice how fast people like to just pile on each other, really cancel one another. And if you look at the whole cancel culture phenomenon, you would begin to notice how it encourages us to just write people off. And I think there's a point to where you can decide, hey, you know what? I'm not just going to write this person off. I'm going to give them a second chance, third, fourth chance. And when you dig even deeper into this, you start asking yourself, okay, what does someone have to do in order for me to write them off? What I mean by the term write someone off, it's like when you just don't deal with them anymore. You cut them out of your life. And you discount them, you just don't really value them. They're just not a part to play in your life. And when it comes to friendships, you have to think about how real friendships, they're going to be tested. And you're going to have to learn how to forgive people. If you don't learn how to forgive, then you're going to have very little friends. Salam, loco, lico. I think a lot of people suffer from depression because of the loneliness of their lives, because they cut some people out too easy. And I think this also has been exacerbated by the block movement. So, if you recall, not too long ago, there was a sister who was like a Muslim content creator. She has, hey Shug, Assalamu alaikum Milahan, thank you for sharing your time and knowledge with us. So glad freakazoids and noise didn't scare you off. Right? Exactly. There was a Muslim sister who she had said something, I don't recall, but I had just made just a regular comment, and she messaged me on X. I'm an anon on X, so the fact that she did that was strange, and then she blocked me immediately after. And I think this has led to people having thinner and thinner skin. And the capacity to block a lot of people and not engage with someone in a difficult situation, I think has made people little by little want to throw each other away very quickly. Because I was thinking about, why are the Muslims so weak right now? What has really subjugated us? And I'm sure there's many answers. But if you really look at how fast Muslims insult each other, calling each other innovators, deviants, and call for the canceling of their brothers and sisters, then you'll wonder, like, okay, that's why they can't unify and they have no really political power anymore, because they are encouraged to just write each other off. Assalamu alaikum, Jesus. And so be mindful of how you write someone off. How can we have hope and maintain that in that individual? Shug says, but also keep in mind the Muslim men's groups, communities online are often so toxic towards ladies, blocking might be their only means for sanity. Now, this is true. Yeah, I agree with that. Like, if you get some bizarro person, definitely handle yourself. Local Lico says, don't judge a book by its cover, right? True, yes. And I'm wondering, so with these chatbot AIs, I asked myself, why are people turning to talk to computer programs instead of individuals? Why aren't they finding real people to talk to? And you look at how politics, sometimes people don't know how to disagree, and they write each other off. Now, I've noticed this since 2016 in America. This is why Tim Pool was always screaming about civil war, because people were like, oh, you like so-and-so? I'm not going to talk to you anymore. And I remember following a lot of liberals who encouraged each other to have arguments at Thanksgiving, right? Shug says, as a guy, I have the leverage and relief to sit back and not have to go through what our Muslim sisters go through online. I couldn't handle a half of it. Yeah, I can We definitely have a intenser critique, I'd argue. It feels like that at times. But if you recall, in 2017, 18, you had a lot of liberals who were saying, progressives, Democrats, who were saying, in American context, at Thanksgiving dinner, bring up politics. If you're not familiar with Thanksgiving, it used to just be a time to celebrate the harvest. It was one of my favorite things as a child. It wasn't religious. No, we weren't celebrating Columbus taking over the Indians. No. It was a time where winter was creeping up. You get your squashes, your pumpkins, you butcher a turkey, you share your food, you invite the whole family over, and a lot of places close. You're allowed to get time off from work, people travel, and you have a big meal and you see cousins who you haven't seen. Remember, FaceTime, that wasn't really a thing then. You know what I mean? Like, you didn't have the technology like today. So people would travel and meet each other. So bringing up politics is a very dirty way to separate the families. Suge says, I don't think there will be a civil war in the U.S. The people don't have the purpose in life and common purpose to pull something like that. Very good point. Someone should tell that to Tim Pool. It's almost like Tim Pool wants it. He's like a very angry, stressed out individual who just can't stop saying it over and over like some type of prayer mantra. But you want to make the family closer at Thanksgiving. That was like one of the goals. But with people writing each other off over politics really quickly, you see the disintegration of the family. And whoever wants to destroy the family really destroys networks of sustaining each other. And so many people complaining about loneliness, and then you see how we are quick to block, quick to argue, quick to throw people away, slow to forgive. Sometimes we don't know how to hold something back or to admit when we are wrong. And we have to be careful. When it comes to the online scene of believers, I'm more charitable. I don't just write them off. But I do, when I've gone through many cancelings. This is weird, is when you get to experience people trying to cancel you. It's a very weird thing, Shug says, and I think a lot of these guys romanticize devastation and division of families that precipitated the founding of the U.S. It was not a clean process. It was really hard. Exactly. Yeah, when there was a civil war in the beginning of America, it was not a pretty picture. Civil war is just never a pretty thing, when there's those very tense times in a nation's history. Hunter says, Assalamu alaikum, everyone, brother. Jesus, if you are a Muslim, it's not. Oh, okay. And so, listen. I like to do self-reflection a lot, okay? And if you think about how fast Muslims like to cancel each other now and throw each other away, and they can't learn to get over some differences, it's going to be almost impossible for us to even make any changes. Think about it. I was looking at, like, what do Muslim sisters need in America? They need all female gyms so that they can work out, because there's so many apartment buildings and so few people will have houses that if we want marriages to stay together, physical fitness and health really matter for sisters, okay? Because some sisters let themselves go to a very large degree and they are inside a lot. Their health deteriorates. They don't take care of themselves, and the husbands, they lust for what they see online. So I was thinking about how many sisters, if somebody opened a Muslim business, where it's like all female gym, all male gym, private membership, this could help a lot of people if we had more Muslim entrepreneurs. And then I realized I think it's hard for Muslims to work together to create really big projects, because so many of the online influencers who could group up and create projects find a lot of reasons to call each other deviants and hate each other. I want to be a scholar of Islam, for example. But what makes me really stressed and confused is people will say so and so's a deviant, so and so's this, so and so's that, and then you're like, sounds like nobody's ever good enough for nobody. So how do you stay motivated? And I'm not saying you can't critique. I'm just saying you may disagree on one thing, so why not try to just be the best you can, but why throw them away? You know what I mean? Shug says, and some Muslims online cancel others because they don't understand the subjects they're talking about and are scared to face it and the doubts that may come, so they use it as a defense. This is a very good point. See, Pathway says, God bless you and your family, Ameen. And yours, Ameen. So, yeah, it's, when I went through so many cancelings, there was like hives of people who were working really hard, inboxing people who follow me on Instagram. I had friends on LinkedIn who were like, hey man, I'm getting these weird threats and stuff, and like people asking me for your information, like I can't handle this, I'm out. And I'm like, that's okay. If you don't want to follow me on social media because you're afraid of the people who will attack you for associating with me, that's fine. And you know, you see these boycotts that happen, like you can't invite so and so to do a podcast because they were canceled by so and so, and if you invite them, then people will think that you agree with everything so and so says, and this is absurd. And I think we have to be more charitable with each other. That's why I've been really working on myself and thinking, how can I not throw people away? Because I'm pretty cold because I have attachment issues. Like I since my mom and dad gave me up when I was a kid, and then my grandparents did, and I have a very cold disposition, almost reptilian-like, where I can cut someone off and never think about them again and not care. It's a survival instinct. Don't form strong attachments. Only love your children. That's it. You know, that doesn't mean I treat people bad. It means I don't get emotionally invested or attached. And this has shocked some people. You know, in the past this was a problem because I'm not a social butterfly, and some people would be like, you know, you just cut that person off, like it was like nothing to you. And I was like, hey man, once the door closes, it stays closed. I don't beg nobody for attention or affection. I don't beg people to be loyal to me. They either are or they're not. And if they're not, I move on. Because at the end of the day, it'll be me dead in my grave and no one knows. And it's just as a survival instinct. You know, being an unwanted child, you have to actually be very strong. But I was looking at how can we make our fellow Muslims better. And I think a key component of that is to not just throw people away really quick. Because if people get the most views from ankle biting each other and canceling each other over willy-nilly topics, then we can't really make people feel the spiritual sense of Islam. Doesn't mean you ignore the faults, just means that you have a balance. You feel me? And when you ask them, so what makes it kufr because the ayat or hadith you quoted don't mention that, then it just becomes ad hominem and the original question was lost. Umar Mustaid says, Assalamu alaikum. Good point. Yeah, when you get into like a lot of nuances, some people are not really well equipped to deal with it. And so, some people, follow me here. Some people complain about immigration. They say, if you have an influx of new people with a new culture, when war breaks out, they will not be unified on a similar creed, and they will not fight with each other for the nation. And they won't be invested. And then I thought of the term invested in each other. If you write people off really easy, you won't be invested in each other. And I thought, carry this idea of investment, bond, unity over to marriages. Women can cut off their marriage right off their husband really easy sometimes. And then you think about gratitude. If you're grateful for someone, you don't write them off as easy. And how do you practice being more grateful? Is that you look at the bounty of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and you see what you have and be thankful for what you have. And if you see the effort someone puts in, even if it's little, this could make you more merciful towards that person. So if you are merciful, you're not going to write people off as easy, because some people put themselves into a corner. They are consistent contrarians. They pick people apart, and then they find themselves all alone. Shug says, Milan is like, I was doing some mental spring cleaning and I found you in here, so I'm getting rid of you. Thanks, much love. That's true. That's exactly true. Because I'll have an idea and I'm like, you know what, I'm going to get this idea out. Or it's going to make me think too much at bedtime and I'll have insomnia. So I always like to get my ideas out so that they, you know, they get out of the archives of my mind. And so when you're looking at your marriage, don't, because there's a thing in marriage called checking out, where they're like, I can't leave this person, so I'm just going to check out mentally and float down the river and just exist. And they write their husbands off, or the husband writes the wife off, and then they don't have that deep connection and romance, and then the children kind of see their parents at odds with each other, and then they get a skewed sense of what holds a marriage together, because lack of communication destroys marriages. If you write someone off, you don't communicate. So look at how everything stems from our tolerance to communicate and our tolerance of keeping people in our lives and knowing when to cut ties, knowing when to write someone off, knowing when to forgive, how to forgive, and who should be forgiven, and to what degree, you know? Now, there's people in my life that I'll be like, no, I have to write them off because they bring drama into my life. They bring too much anger or too much worry, you know? And then you have to protect your mental health. But then sometimes I've thought about how I maybe was too quick with someone, or I didn't have patience, and then I wrote them off, and then I'm like, dang man, that was actually a good friend. I should have done better there. Shuk says, I found it far easier to just turn my back on a relationship that go through the hardship of working through problems, but I realized I have to work on that. That's true. You know, you have to know, like, when you don't quit when it gets a little tense. Because if you look at these people who've been married for 40 years, you're looking at cycles of life. It's pretty wild, you know? How many times you'll get in an argument, and I think we're being trained to just be very restrictive and selfish, and we've become too survivalist. And we're losing our mental fortitude and the capacity to forgive, because so much around us is fake, so many people are manipulators. We're almost in a panic survival mode of write everyone off so they don't leech on me, so they don't ride my coattails and ankle bite. Because I've seen some content creators, if one of their fans disagrees with them, they block them. Like, I'm not talking like just like, oh, let's say the person is insulting the content creator, like with a diatribe of endless insults. That I understand. But there are literally some people who don't permit any type of dissension, any type of disagreements in their chats. So they're writing off their own fans, and then they're hunting for new fans, but they only want yes men. This is interesting. Writing people off creates yes men, because people will fear to speak their mind because they don't want to be cut off. Shug says, I found that the married couples that go back and forth, like trading barbs and such, tend to have better marriages than the people that just hold back and hold it in. Yeah, if you hold it in, it comes out in the weirdest ways, right? It comes out in bottling up anger doesn't work. Bottling up thoughts and such really just curdles the soul, ferments, you know? Irwin Smith, greetings, greetings. And so, like, I'll have professors in the past where some you write off because you're like, okay, they're just too different, they're far out. But then others, you're like, okay, we disagree on this policy, or maybe they like so and so, but overall, they're pretty cool, you know? So I'm gonna keep them in my email list for if I have a question in the future, just shoot them an email and get an advice. Because networking can really help you. You always hear entrepreneurs talking about networking. At the same time, people write off each other too fast. Shug says, and I crack up when I see the little old couples in this little tiffs, and then it calms down and they're back to laughing and sitting together later on. Yeah, like old Italian couples. Old Italian couples and old Chinese couples have that art to them that's really cool. Because they divorce isn't like a huge thing there. And so if people say it takes a village to raise kids, but then you realize how some of the families write each other off really quick, well, we're having a problem. And the more you write others off, the more you feel like, I don't need nobody, nobody cares about me, I'm all alone in this world, I'm a lone wolf. And then you realize, okay, you're going to have moments where you're alone in the forest. You're going to go on that journey of life where you're going to be tested and realize it's just you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But you have to know when to extend your hand to someone and pull them up and say, you know what, I forgive you. You know, there'll be other times where someone screwed you over and you have to protect yourself, right? If someone's done a crime against you, definitely be like, nah, I gotta write you off, because you can kiss a snake all you want, but you can't change the nature of a snake, you know? Shug says, and it helps if the married couple enter into the marriage as a sacrament, believing divorce is not an option. Even when it is, they will strive to hold it together. I've heard this mentioned. I was watching a documentary on Terry Cruz's life, and he talked about how his mom believed that. She was a Christian. And that woman endured a lot. If you also think about the nature of the person you're dealing with, I don't think you'll write them off as easy. There's a lot of eccentric people who I know who are kind of quirky. They're kind of strange. But I don't let their strangeness get in the way of who they are. I still value them, even though they might do something very bizarre. Like, they collect things that don't really make sense, but they are really intelligent. You know, there's going to be something off about every person. You know, somebody maybe has too many cats. Another person has old newspapers that they haven't thrown away, but they like to look at them and they think they're vintage and they're collectors. But they kind of will be like, hey man, do you have any newspapers? And you're like, no, I don't. You know, like, I'm trying to give niche examples, but you'll be more forgiving with irritation. Because when you're irritated with someone's behavior, you might write them off quicker than you should, and that person might be able to help you in the future. See, writing people off should be more serious, in my opinion. Shuk says, Milan, listen, you are objectively weird, but there are many redeeming qualities about you I find intriguing, and that's why we stay friends for like, I mean, that you put it in a great way, but you know, exactly. Because when you get around some people, I try to see, like, who is this person, you know? What's their life like? How did they grow up? I try to be very, very charitable. Jennifer Habib says, I watched that too. Watched what? And be mindful. If someone has addictions, then you have to be careful. Then I think you can write some people off if they have a dangerous drug addiction. But if they get sober and they've changed their ways, you know they're not going to steal from you, Give them a chance. But just be cautious, because when they relapse, it can get fuzzy. Especially people who have a meth addiction. When they relapse, they hallucinate and they can hurt you. They can hurt you really bad. Especially if they've stayed awake for 2 days and they're seeing things and you're like, hey, I gotta call in law enforcement because they're hallucinating to such a degree they don't even think I'm real. So you have to be mindful. Like, I have some cousins who they're just very far gone. I'll never introduce them to my children. And I just have to say, hey man, when you get sober, I'll write you back in my life. But until then, you're going to have to keep your distance. So keeping, safe people around you is important. That's that. I don't get confused and think I'm telling you to keep some type of criminals or something like that. But if you find yourself wanting to cancel somebody, really be careful. And know that they can apologize, but remember, apologizing is a leftist tactic so that you just forget. Like when Asmongold exposed what he really thought about the suffering of the Palestinians, and then he apologized, he was really just trying to save his money base, clearly. He was expecting to get an influx of Zio money. He wasn't expecting to see, watermelon emojis and people really pushing back. So when he apologized, well, is it genuine? Probably not. Shug says, and it's hard with drug addiction. You want to be there when they reach out, but you don't want to be close by when they last out or steal, rob to feed the addiction. Very difficult situations. Exactly. And remember, there are people who will change and others who will not change. So knowing the balance. And remember, you need to maybe sit down and just do a mental exercise of what are the conditions that you have, the boundaries that you have where you will be willing to write someone off, and where is their wiggle room? Where's their wiggle room? And when you go to work, sometimes you write certain people off just for the sake of sanity. Maybe you have like an office person who's really gossipy. They're like a secret spy. They'll like snitch anything you do out for no reason at all. They have a vendetta against you, so you write them off for the sake of having sanity at work. There's things like that. But I think it's high time that the Muslims start learning to compliment one another, appreciate one another, so that we can start getting things we need in the Ummah. We have so much work we have to do. We need to start building things. More Islamic schools, jobs, like for sisters. A lot of women are afraid to convert to Islam because they're like, okay, where can I work while wearing the Muslim clothing? How do we make our nation, like some nations, they may not always have oil, especially with the clean energy movement. You gotta figure, how are you gonna make it so that if a woman becomes a widow, how is she gonna survive? How can we help Muslim women have job security if they need it, where they won't face discrimination? And one of those ways is Muslims opening more businesses and hiring fellow believers. But if people write each other off too soon, you can't get business partnerships. Remember, if so many Muslims collab with each other, they may disagree on this or that. But if they were able to not write each other off so easily, then they would say, hey, maybe we can work together on this project. And then we could create a better lasting future for the Muslims. Really think about it. Because if people are just only allowing themselves to be angry at each other, you can't really get a lot of trade done. You can't get a lot of business opportunities. Abdullah, he must be thinking about other girls. I want to see Kamza win UFC 308, but it's Milan's live stream at exactly the same time. Oh, yo, did I interrupt your UFC thing? Sorry, fam. I didn't know. I didn't know. I didn't know. I hope whoever you want to win wins. MashaAllah, tabarakallah. And one of the reasons why I wanted to do the compliment series, because I thought, okay, we can disagree with certain things of everyone, but how about we just start saying good things about each other? Because all of us have benefited in some way from the work that some people are doing, even if you disagree on some things. Because when you look at the people of Palestine, and you see, like, okay, so many people have given money, yet there's refugee camps that look like no one's tending to them. There's tons of rubble. Where's all the money going? Why, like, what is happening here? And you see people can't cooperate. People can't work together. People are just tearing each other apart. And then you're like, we're writing each other off too soon. Shook says, I thought the compliment series was very thoughtful, and I hope it was received well. I hope so too. And when I think of some other people to compliment, I'll definitely add stuff in, or just add multiples of the same person when they do something I think is, noteworthy. Because there's a lot of so-and-so's a deviant, so-and-so's this, and they may have made a mistake in something they said. But there's something called a purity spiral, where everybody wants to be the perfect one, and they finger point quite a lot, Erwin says, yes, I enjoyed that series, very positive. Yeah, thank you. And I definitely want to try to put on some non-Muslims on there, because I benefit from a lot of different content creators and a lot of intellectuals who have helped me gain a lot of skills, especially some of the history channels, like Julius Caesar's Diary and The People's Voice. Oh my goodness, it's been great. I watched one on Vlad the Impaler. I was like, whoa! I heard of that guy, but I didn't know he was that scary, And then Ivan the Terrible of Russia. And, I was like, dang, man, these people are dedicating time to just really educating us. And so I appreciate that. It takes time to do that kind of stuff. Also, a lot of the true crime channels, I really appreciate them, even though it's a macabre, kind of morbid topic. But it makes me realize what is on Earth and how cautious we have to be, and just how this planet is very bizarre. And it makes me it makes me have a security mindset. I will tell you that. And, like, for example, women, sometimes we can be very prone to fighting. Very prone to jealousy, envy, holding a grudge. Grudges are very hard to let go, sometimes, for women, I've noticed. And when you have a grudge, you've written somebody off. And so getting people to forgive, to look past different slights, to cooperate, to have mercy, to have empathy, to pardon, these are great things. And if more people pardoned each other, they wouldn't write each other off as easy. I'm not saying you can't just be like critique or critically analyze someone's error or fault, but just that if you notice someone rarely compliments, rarely empowers someone to feel good about themselves, I think it's a sort of vampiric loneliness. Because some people are truly desperately lonely, and the only way they know how to get attention is by being a contrarian, and then they want a bunch of yes men around them, and anyone who disagrees, they ban them, and then they write people off really easy. Because let me tell you something. If you write people off really easy, Assalamu alaikum, Fatuma, It's hard for people to want to be loyal to you. I've noticed this. Think about it. If you know someone is quick to cut you off, even though you did them a lot of favors, you will not trust that individual. I have seen some content creators where they have fans giving them super chats, money, always be in every show. That commenter says something critical, and that person says, you're banned, you're out of here," and you're like, "Dang." And then that content creator will say stuff like, just because you think just because you donate a lot, you get to disagree with me in public. No, you don't have a right to say that. Like, I've noticed that arrogance come in people's hearts, where they don't value other people that much, and then they cut people off super easy, and you're like, nah, man. If you're that quick to just forget what someone's done for you, then how could I ever trust you? You know? And then some people will complain they have a lot of enemies. But if you write a lot of people off, you create more enemies. Think about it. Think about it. I remember reading, there's a loneliness epidemic and antidepressant prescriptions are up. And, people are just telling all their problems to their therapists. And you realize how many people don't have a person whom they can talk to. The best people you can talk to are people who you've built a relationship over time to where they know who you are. They know your good side and your bad side. They hold your feet to the fire, and you got to be willing to hear it. But if you wrote them off too early, you'll never have that longtime friend. Like, I have a friend who I've known her since I was 3 years old. Her mom is a great lady, and she's known me since all through elementary school, junior high, high school, and then has seen my conversion to Islam. Like, that's wild. And it's because, like, we know what topics not to bring up, and we know what topics to kind of forgive each other. And if I'm doing something wrong, she'll be like, "Hey man, you done messed up." And I'm like, "Oh dang man, you're right." And sometimes she'll disagree with something, and I'll be like, "Yeah, I can see your point, but I'm gonna keep my opinion." And then we kind of move on to talk about something else. And so that's been a friendship, with a 30, over a 30-year friendship. And when you have years of being friends with somebody, you don't write them off as easy. Because people are a resource. Relationships are a resource. Connections are a resource. Networking is a resource. It's something you tap into. It's like a net. If you look at how networks form and you draw dots and you just see all these connections, you're like, this is like a web. It's a net. A safety net. Networks can be a safety net, and if you're writing people off, cutting them out of your life, you're not really creating a good net for yourself. Sometimes you will have to go it alone, no doubt, because we all are on our own path in life, and the only one who can walk in our shoes is ourselves. But connections matter, and be cautious. I think if you have 5 good connections in your life, I think you've done pretty well. But there are some people who will think because they're connected on LinkedIn or they're connected on Facebook or they got a bunch of followers that somehow means that they have friends. And it's like, no. You gotta have real people who you can call when stuff goes down. And I also noticed there's something called audience capture. When another content creator goes hard on another one, they're hoping to capture some of that audience, driving a wedge. And I think this shows they don't have an abundance mindset. They don't think, hey, you know what? There's plenty of subscribers and eyeballs to go around for everyone. Truly, the planet is filled with people with all different schedules, It's a different time everywhere. So you don't really need to do audience capture. Like, oh, I have to cut off so and so because they're my competition. Oh, so and so streams at the same time as me. Therefore, they are attacking me, and I have to go at them and then write them out of my life, and I have to make the audience pick them or me. And this is a form of selfishness. It's a form of greed. It's even like a form of miserliness. And so, having gratitude for what you have, you begin to have more mercy in life, and then that helps you to see people as a resource, and you don't get rid of them so easily. If you really think about how cancel culture really has gotten out of hand, because it's so easy now to pile on, you have to be like, wow, the internet's forever. So if the internet is, it's not, we don't, the internet can end, no doubt, but there's the term, the internet is forever, it means that your mistakes are captured in a digital archive outside of your control. Now we know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sees everything, knows everything, will be held accountable for everything. But the problem comes with the internet is that some person will say, you know, I think so and so should have a revolution, so and so should accept refugees, so and so should make this law. People will disagree, and they're like, no, because of this one policy, you know, we can't ever agree with this person on anything whatsoever. We're building a wall between us, a symbolic wall, and then we're never going to communicate, never going to cooperate, and there's going to be this just permanent tension. And who does that really serve? You know, who does that really serve? So we have to be careful, is my point. Be very careful. Now, there's some people who are super sketch. You meet them, you're like, this person seems like they're a scammer, or there's something off about them. You know, give it time. You gotta flesh some people out. You gotta really vet. Vetting people before you write them off really helps you to see if you calculated correctly, if you made the right choice. Because favors from other people can really help you in life. But if you wrote them off over something stupid, you're not going to get that favor. You know, we have the opportunity to give favors to somebody and them to us. But if we write each other off too soon because we disagreed on something minor and we didn't know how to forgive and didn't know how to move on, well, now that's one less person who you can call upon to help you out of a sticky situation, give you a recommendation, connect you with a job, you know. Milan, Shuk says, Milan, fine, you don't like me, but just know in the zombie apocalypse, my doors are dead bolted and my weak corner are not free. I'm hoarding all the mayonnaise. Ain't nobody getting my mayonnaise, you know. They disagree. You ain't getting none of the mayonnaise. My kid likes saying a lot of stuff about, if there's a zombie apocalypse, you know, this stick would be great as a spear. You know, she does a lot of that things. My eldest. Oh, this backpack would be great in the zombie apocalypse. It has so many pockets. Now, I've also talked to my children about an acquaintance versus a friend, and what do you owe people? What do you owe them? Basic respect. But respect is earned, it isn't given, but there is a baseline. You know? There is a baseline. And how you write someone off is also based on their standing in your life and what you owe them. For example, you see a lot of people not liking their boomer parents. And they'll say like, oh, you know, these boomers, they're so selfish. They sell their houses for too much money. You know, we don't value anything they say. You can see this sort of generational hatred. And then writing each other off. And I just don't think that's very productive. It's more kind when you look at it from a comedic angle. Like, a millennial said this. Gen Z said that. Comedy can really help us not write each other off. Because we're all a product of our time when you really look at it. We really are. Because each generation is exposed to different information, different customs and norms. And if you remember that, you won't write people off as soon. There's also different cultures. I when I worked with a lot of Chinese and Vietnamese people, there were some Indonesians as well. You learn that their culture is very different. How you're supposed to talk to elders, to each other, work ethic. You're like, oh, so their culture is like this, and then here's my culture. We might have had a culture clash for a second, but I shouldn't just write them off because we had a little mini culture clash. You know, it almost makes me think of how we're told to be good neighbors, but sometimes we may fail to be good neighbors ourselves, and that we're not supposed to really wish harm upon our neighbors, but that they would be the best versions of themselves. And so, in times of emergency disasters, your neighbors really do matter. Your neighbors look out for your property. You want to be respectful to each other. A lot of people don't have connections with their neighbors, and they may hate their neighbor and write them off really easy over a minor thing. But if they forgave each other, you know, one day there'll be some favor, Shug says, yes, the whole okay groomer, okay zoomer and skits are humorous and drawing attention to differences and explaining them. That's true, yes. yeah, it's true. So, think about it. Because remember, we're told in many hadiths to keep ties with kith and kin. To keep the ties means you're not writing people off willy-nilly. Now, keeping a distance from truly wicked people, as I said earlier, people who are completely dysfunctional, yeah. But when it comes to the social media scene, be careful. Be really careful. And if somebody attacks their own audience members really quickly, and then they get a bunch of enemies, and then they're like, I'm a victim because I got all these enemies. But they're like, did you make those enemies because you picked fights with your own fans too much? Think about it. Because some people don't forget what you did to them. Some people, you hurt their feelings, they hold on to that grudge for a long time. And it hurts. Like, if someone has invested in you and you didn't invest in them, there's like an unequal exchange of appreciation. You write them off when they valued you, they now become a very strong opponent. Think about that. Every time you cut someone off, you might be creating a potential enemy. So, the way in which you cut people off matters as well. There's like a respectful, slow distancing. Others are a wall, cold turkey, ghosting, not responding. There's a bunch of different ways. But be careful, because the way you cut someone off and write them off can create a huge enemy. Because remember, it doesn't feel good to be ignored, to be thrown away. And so if you have a large ego, you think you're the queen of the castle, you're the most special person in the world, and then you write someone off as a plebeian, someone who doesn't matter, and that person really thought you were like a hero, they looked up to you, they appreciated you, and then they suddenly realize the veil has been lifted from their eyes, and that you weren't the person that they thought, or they were shocked by your behavior, you wrote them off like they were a flea. Suddenly you have a nemesis. You have an antagonist. This is something interesting. I've been thinking about it quite a lot. Because as a young child, I didn't form very many bonds, because when you're an unwanted child and you know it, you're like, I gotta survive, man. Gotta survive. Gotta have the tribal unit. Just gotta keep on keeping on. And when I had, a drunk stepdad, two drunken stepmoms, you're like, you form these attachments, they go away, you're left hurt. So you create this sort of callus in your heart. And if you're not careful, it'll calcify and push too many people out. Shug, I never thought I'd learn from Milahan the art of thoughtful ghosting. But it's true. We have to learn about these things and how to close the door on relationships. Yes. The art of thoughtful ghosting is the perfect way to say it. And then how to close the door on relationships. Yes. It matters. And I recall some women, their relationship ends, and then now that person can't stop slandering their ex. They can't let it go. They get into a new relationship, they still talking about that guy. They were written off. They can't forgive. And now the new person they're with is about ready to write them off. They don't know how to end the chapter. Ending the chapter is really important. And I think we have to also remember different cultures have different customs, and you be cognizant of that. Like, hey man, you write so and so off in a really disrespectful way, they're never gonna talk about you good in the community, and that can be a problem later if you need something from somebody. So be careful, be mindful. Abrar says hi, assalamu alaikum. So just something to think about, okay? Because I'm very introspective. I try to see what have I done wrong. Peter, having an enemy is inevitable, and if you don't have an enemy, then you don't know who is your enemy. Yeah, if you have enemies, you're doing something right. It's impossible to get along with everybody, but I think you have a certain amount of control with how many enemies you create. I remember a famous quote that said, 12 mangy dogs can kill a lion. That stuck with me for years. You can be a lion, but when weaker ones gather towards you, you have a problem. Have you ever watched a wasp go into a honeybee hive and how the honeybees, sure, some get taken down, but they swarm? I like to watch ants when they're eating a grasshopper. They took down that big grasshopper. Like, you're like, whoa, they just like swarmed it. So how many enemies you have really does matter. And even if you only have one enemy, if he's like really connected, that can be kind of scary. I don't think we shouldn't travel through life on eggshells, like, I don't want to make nobody mad, I just want to be liked by everybody, I'll be a chameleon. That don't work. But I think there's a way to where you don't purposely rub salt in the eyes of people. Because arrogance and callousness, entitlement, it's off-putting, right? And when someone thinks they're under your wing, they are in your inner circle, and then you kick them out, being thrown out into the cold, you're like, whoa, I just gave that person like a presence in my life, and they just threw me away like I was nothing. Am I nothing? What does everything even mean right now? And then they have to go and process that information, and they go through like a cycle where they're like, oh, screw them, but then they replay it in their head over and over, and they're like, oh, I should have said this, I should have said that, you know what, I'm gonna message them right now and give them a piece of my mind. And then it escalates. Why do so many people blast each other? Because they got written off in a way that was just like, whoa. Think about how many people in the cartels, the mafias, you name it, they're like, oh, that person did this, take them out, put a green light on them. And then the regular people in the community suffer because those groups are evil. They can't figure out how to, not create problems for the society. But when those groups write each other off, it creates chaos. Think about it. You have macho guys, and there's also women in those organizations who they're doing deals, power plays. When they write each other off, lives end, and innocent people feel the results of that and are caught in the middle because they don't know how to fix their problems. Now, they're evil and they should all be in prison, no doubt. I'm just talking about how quickly those personalities, neither one wants to bend, Each one thinks they're right, and each one thinks they're the most important in the world, and so should bend the knee. You know? And when you write someone off, you're also underestimating some people. Remember that. Some people, low key, will surprise you. And you're like, oh. Think about how some women, they threw away the relationship, they see the guy later with a nice car, and then they want to go back to him. Oh, hi, how are you? How you doing? And then the guy's like, man, you wrote me off like I was a nobody. Now I have money. Now you want me? You see? Think about it. Really getting to know someone and knowing when it's time to close the door, when it's time to close the chapter, how to do it in the best way possible with the least resistance and the least collateral is a lifesaver in many regards. I wish I would have learned that, because I sometimes was the cause of someone writing me off, and then I had that grudge, and then I beat them up, and then now they want revenge, and then the revenge just keeps going back and forth. Well, I'm older now. I'm talking about like when I was younger, you know. So, like, there was one time, for example, there was a lady who, she came to me because her husband had had a heart attack and passed away. She needed someone to talk to. I didn't really think I was the right person for her to talk to because we didn't have a good, like, we weren't close. But I had to be very careful with everything I said to her because she was in a very emotional state. And I think some of the responses I told her she didn't like. And I was like, she's probably going to write me off because I was saying Islamic things about life and death and the purpose of life. I don't know her religion, but she came to me and can clearly see my religion. So if she was surprised I gave Islamic responses and not secular responses, that's on her. And I thought, okay, if she writes me off, it's going to be super awkward when I see her when I'm getting my children, you know, when I'm out and about or picking up my little one from school. But she said hi to me not too long ago, so she didn't write me off, but it's like, it can be really uncomfortable, you know? When you know someone might write you off for talking basic things, it's a very uncomfortable feeling. And then that's why some people have anxiety around others. That's why some people are loners, because they're afraid to form connections because it hurts to get rejected, and writing someone off is being rejected. You know? Shug says, and you don't know the person that you had to close the door on might come back into your life later on in another capacity, and you could benefit one another. Very true. Anas, assalamu alaikum. Walaikum assalam. Anas, first time on live vid. I respect you so much, sister. Thanks, fam. Thanks for being here. I'm glad you were able to make it and tune in. So, remember, there's going to be awkward situations in life too, where, you know, maybe they didn't answer you the way you wanted, but you're like, don't just write them off because we had an awkward conversation, you know? Because as someone gets to know you, the awkwardness kind of goes away over time. Abrar says, well, when people like asking me for help in their issues, I tend to give them realistic solutions, not emotional support. That is very important too. Yeah, that is a good thing to bring up. Realistic solutions versus emotional support. Some women, I have noticed, when they ask a man, they start telling the problems, the man starts saying, why don't you do this, or maybe you could do that. They get mad and say like, I just want you to listen to me vent. But the guy is trying to problem solve, where you're treating him like an emotional teddy bear, but you didn't make it clear what you needed from him, and then they get mad. You know, that's an interesting thing to bring up. And then those women will write off their guy like, he didn't meet my emotional needs. And the guy's like, I literally gave you a solution. Like, I was trying to problem solve, trying to do logistics here. And then she's like, well, he didn't hear me talk about my problems for 2 hours. You know, he just started saying what I could do better or something. And yeah, that's a very good point. Just showing the differences between men and women's brains sometimes. Emotional support versus someone trying to help you get practical solutions and realistic options to what is the dilemma that is causing you the disturbance. Perfectly stated. See, that's another thing too. So look at all the options on the table before you write someone off. And remember, finger point, they're like hounds tearing at each other. We can't really unify. If you have sled dogs and they're all biting at each other, the sled is not going to move. You're not going to get to where you got to go. Working in unison and, putting the sled dogs next to the dog they're most compatible with, and putting the right dog in the lead, you're going to do okay. It's very fascinating. It's also like when some people, they have like a herd of goats, which ones they're going to keep and breed based off their temperament and which ones they're going to harvest. So which ones are written off for slaughter and which ones are put in the proper place of where they belong. And I think we have to think similar things in our own lives. Where can we write someone in our life? What distance should we place on them? What's the appropriate context and situation for them in particular? Abrar says, you are talking about man from Mars and women from Venus book. That was like a song I heard. Men are from Mars and women are from Venus. And then the song turned vulgar after that. I remember something like that. But I think it'd be very helpful if there was a podcast where Muslims could come and, talk about their differences. Popular da'is. Just trying to get people to reach across the table, shake hands, and be like, hey man, we disagreed on this, this, and that, but overall, we're going to have a peace treaty with each other, Or maybe sometimes someone heard you wrong. Maybe you didn't understand somebody, and then you wrote them off. Misunderstandings can lead to a lot of write-offs. So ask yourself, did I misunderstand this person? Did they misunderstand me? Because some people lose their temper real fast. They start to be like, they interrupt the person before they can finish. They write them off in their head. They bulldoze the conversation. And you didn't really let them explain themselves. If you would have let them, then you wouldn't have been writing them off. And when people don't feel heard, and then you wrote them off, they can become an enemy. Remember that. That's important too. Because some people create a lot of enemies for themselves because of how they treat people in a disposable manner. And when someone is always like, I don't need nobody. I don't need you. I don't need you. F you. And then that person's like, I'm so lonely. I'm so lonely. Nobody cares about me. Hey man, you slapping away every hand that came around you. And every person who didn't become a yes man for you, you kicked to the curb. And now you're surrounded by sycophants. You're surrounded by glazed eyes individuals who will never hold you accountable for your garbage. And now you are the insane emperor who is in an echo chamber going delusional. Think about it. And then some people hold on to others too long. Way too long. And you're like, hey man, you have to put that person out to pasture. Put them to pasture. And stop letting them dig their claws in, You gotta fix that up. So the timing is everything, So something to think about. I'd be curious to read your comments later on. Please like, comment, and subscribe. If you'd like to read more things that I get into, you can join the blog, which is www.subscribestar.com/Milahan Archive. Hope to see you there. I'm gonna go do some cooking because today we went to the grocery store and I got some new recipes that I want to try, and I'm very hungry. I got a nice salad, and it has beets, goat cheese, candied pecans, spinach and arugula with a balsamic vinaigrette. My mouth is watering. It's waiting for me, so I'll have a nice sparkling water, have that salad, and then get to cooking before the children come home from their martial arts class. So take care. Thanks for tuning in. I appreciate all of you. Thank you for giving me time in your life. Thank you for joining the live stream. I know there's a lot of competition out there, and there's a lot of bigger channels and more people who know how to have fancy edits and stuff. So let me tell you something. I appreciate all of you for being here, and thanks for tuning in and not writing me off. Take care, fam. Until next time.